Hi everyone, I'm going to do a short video about my first impressions listening to the Boyuurange A50 300B amp. As I'm going to cover in another video, it seems to be calibrated for 120 volts. The filament voltages all came out spot on, running it straight out of line voltage at my house. I pulled it up on a variac to make sure. So this amplifier doesn't need a bucking transformer or one of those APS boxes to drop the voltage down to 110 volts, which is a really good thing. Saves a lot of hassle. I guess they've listened to people complaining about that and have started speccing 120 volt transformers for the ones that they're sending to Amazon. This is right at $1,000 with the cage, the tubes, ready to go, just like this. And I compared it to a couple of hand-built tube amps that I've done a lot of tuning on and I feel sound really good, and did some quick A/B swaps to compare the two, and gonna let you know what I think of this amplifier. As it comes with these China 6S and 7 clone tubes, it sounds really shrill. That's the best way I can describe it. A couple of songs that I use, Madman Across the Water from Elton John. There's some vocals that can quickly turn from sounding like a male voice to shrillness. And with these tubes, it sounds shrill. There's some other higher end notes in that song. Also, Billie Jean by Michael Jackson has got really heavy bass line, but it's got, of course, Michael's shrill voice, and it is ear-splitting listening to it with these tubes. I did try swapping out these PSV 300Bs to some of the Treasure black-coated 300B tubes, which I think sound excellent. Didn't really notice a huge change. So I think these tubes will be fine. There's no point to rush out and replace the 300B tubes with anything else. They actually sounded better than the Electro-Harmonic 300B tubes that I tried in it. So these guys are good to go. On the rectifier tube, I'm a little concerned that the plate voltage that also is feeding the coupling capacitor to the grid of the 300B, it's right at 230 volts, and the coupling capacitor that's spec'd in the amp is only good for 250 volts. So it's bumping up on the edge of what it can deal with. So I'm going to test in another video if it's possible to swap in a 5AR4 to try to bump up the B plus on both the driver and the 300B. But for now, I'm going to say stick with the rectifier tube it comes with. I did swap in these short bottle side getter. The one I have is labeled a GE. The match to it I have is labeled Sentinel. I've heard that RCA actually makes this tube. It's a 6S and 7 GTA. Here's a close-up of it. Of all the tubes that I swapped into this amp, these sounded the best. These, just from experience, I know have a little extra bass, and the upper end's a little toned down, even compared to some of the Sylvania tall bottles and the Russian 6H8Cs. So, given how this amp seems to be kind of tuned, at least listening to on my Klipsch RP600M speakers, I think that these little short bottle side getter tubes are a huge improvement to the way this amp sounds. Just as I expected from my exploration of the voltages and looking at the scope patterns, this amp's really easy to drive to clipping. It doesn't take much of anything. I mean, I think a cell phone will be enough drive for this amplifier to drive it to heavy distortion. So it does have a very sensitive front end, which is good if you're going to be driving it with a cell phone or something like that. But for hi-fi use, I think that some internal rewiring is really going to wake the amp up. The other problem I noted listening to it is the bass is really thin. I mean, it's there, but there's something about it. I don't know whether it's the harmonics aren't really working well with the lower frequencies, and it just doesn't have that richness that I'm used to with a good tube amp. But it just doesn't sound that great. Maybe if you're coming from a solid state amp, you'll be happy with it. But I just feel like that there's something missing, especially when I was doing A to B with the 300B amp that I built after swapping the front end from this direct coupled dual triode to a cascode that acts more like a pentode and gives a lot more voltage swing to the 300B. So, if you're buying one of these, plan to use it out of the box. It's not a bad sounding amplifier. Like I said, first thing you want to do is throw these made in China 6S and 7 clones away and pick up a pair of these GE, RCA, whoever made these things. Like I said, I'm going to show you the close-up again. It's got a side getter, short bottle. These are new old stock tubes. I'm not sure if there's any new stock tubes that would work well in this amp. Most of what I've got for 6S and 7s is new old stock, other than the Russian tubes, and honestly, they didn't sound very good either. They still had that shrillness. They were better than these China clones, but they still didn't sound as good as these little short bottles did. The jacks are really nice. Looked at the internals. The speaker jacks are direct soldered. They don't have screw type connections, which is nice. The RCA seems, pretty well shielded. There's 3 different sources that you can access via this knob. It's got a couple of VU meters that kind of dance around. I'm not sure really how useful those are. You gotta have the volume pretty loud for them to be even moving. And again, I'm not really sure the value in that, other than it's something that kind of lights up on the front of the amp. Nice finish. If you like the style, some people hate it, think it's too gothic looking or too Roman kind of looking with these columns, but some people really like it. So that's a totally up to you aesthetic kind of a thing. Potted output transformers, the power transformer, it does seem to run cool. I did burn the amp in for about 4 hours with a 1K sine wave going through it into some dummy loads, just to let things seat in, burn in. I do think that especially the coupling capacitors benefit from a little bit of time on them. So all of this testing and stuff that I've been doing is on an amp that's been burned in for a few hours into some dummy loads. Overall, I think this amp has a lot of potential. I'm not seeing a lot of distortion coming out of the output transformers, so that's telling me that these are probably pretty decent output transformers. The other thing though is the bass really isn't there, and until I rewire the front end, I won't know whether it is the way that the front end really just doesn't have enough drive for the 300B, or if these output transformers or the limitation on that. So that's it for this short video about my initial listening to this amp. I do think that it sounds pretty decent. It's really a 3-watt amp for my measurements, not a 7. You need to have some super efficient speakers like some of these Klipses or something ideally over 90 decibels per watt. And I think you'll really enjoy this amp. Obviously, with only a few hours of time listening to it, I can't get into too much critique of how everything sounds. But like I said, it sounds good, but it's not extraordinary. And both of my other tube amps that I built myself, to me, sound a lot more musical and a lot better, even though they do have higher distortion at the normal listening volumes. I did notice there is some sounds like 60 hertz hum at the speaker when you got your ear right up to it. And I'm not sure whether that's coming out of the driver or the 300B wiring. I have a feeling it's got something to do with the way they did the DC offset connected to just one side of the filament on the driver tubes. And I'm hoping that by creating a virtual center tap with a couple of 100 ohm resistors that we can eliminate that little bit of hum that I'm hearing out of the amp. So hopefully you're enjoying this video series, and there's going to be a lot more to come as we really dive in to this A50. So please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Like the video, and we'll be back pretty soon for some more 300B fun. Have a nice day.